Our belief systems are the things that help us interpret our experiences in life as either good, safe, or not good, not safe, right? And so with a high achiever, the mindset that they notoriously are running on is something called a fixed mindset. And that's a mindset that believes that once we actually get to a certain stage in the evolution of the maturation process, usually once we graduate from our schooling years and we get into our working years, that our knowledge is pretty fixed and finite, meaning that we're expecting ourselves to be cooked and to be able to then transition into our working lives, being able to just, get it right every single time. Welcome to the Leadership Launchpad Podcast, the Legacy Edition, where conscious leaders unite to unlock their highest potential so collectively we can change the way the game is being played. Welcome to the Leadership Launchpad Podcast, changing the way this game is being played. And we are back in this locker room. Tracy Allen sitting to my left, ready to co-pilot another amazing one-on-one conversation. We are picking up exactly where we left off. Last time we had this really rich, deep conversation about this whole concept of grounded empathy. I feel like that is such an important concept and especially in this context of conscious leadership, right? I thought that we brought a lot of valuable intel in and around just, how to adapt, right? When we're in real-time situations with our people, we're delivering that feedback and they're not receiving it in the way that it is necessarily being intended. Which is for the purposes of their growth. And so what we thought we would do this time is Tracy had an amazing question coming through the locker room doors today that she thought she could use to tee us up so that we could actually go to that next step of depth in our self-leadership and understanding what it is that we can do to prepare to actually receive feedback in the way that it's intended, and what we can actually do to be responsive to that feedback, right? So that we actually can realize the growth op. And so Trace, I'm gonna pass you the puck. You had a nice entry point for us to be able to go to this next step of depth. So you wanna share with our people what had you thinking about this today?
Yeah. So I was thinking about the last discussion we had and where we were talking about, myself in terms of not getting too caught up into the empathy of our people when we're giving feedback. And I think one of the things that I think is really important to help our listeners and our people is how to get feedback, how to receive feedback and use it to our better good. Right? Because feedback comes in different forms, ugly, pretty, dressed up, not so much, pretty raw sometimes, and puts us on our heels. And not necessarily do we take the time. Most people will just avoid and just put it away and say, that's just crap. I don't like who gave it to me. I'm moving on. But I think I really do believe, as we talk about conscious leadership, this is like, there's a reason this is coming to you as feedback. It may not all resonate with you 100%, but I always do believe there's one or two nuggets in there in terms of truth, which is important for us as individuals to actually sit and reflect on objectively, and not so much about ourselves and, where it came from. But if we can kind of remove ourselves a little bit and sit and take a look at that and see what resonates, what could we take out of that we can then integrate and change for the better of ourselves, it's an opportunity for growth. And if we ignore all the feedback because we don't like how it was delivered, we're missing an opportunity for growth. So I think that it's just building on the empathy I had because of the reaction I get from some of my people when I do give feedback, because it is a little bit difficult for our ego sometimes to hear things that are not congruent with what we see or what we feel. But if we can help our people and help, others understand that feedback is actually an opportunity for us to grow. And if we can just be open to that, and sometimes it's not as well delivered as what we would like, We don't want to shut our ears off. We still want to sit back, take an objective kind of view, and then kind of pull from that. What can I take from that to help me grow as an individual? Because if we don't do that, we're missing a wonderful opportunity for growth.
Yeah, well, the place I feel like we got to start is just understanding, especially with high achievers, why we can have such an adverse reaction to the very notion of receiving feedback from our leaders. And I think this is something that we put so much emphasis on in our leadership development programs because this is massively a mindset equation. Mindset is a terminology that comes from neuroscience. It basically refers to this playbook of beliefs back here in the autopilot subconscious part of our brain, right? That area of the brain that's just below our awareness, but is actually the thing that is running the show in terms of how we filter life, right? Our belief systems are the things that help us interpret our experiences in life as either good, safe, or not good, not safe, right? And so with a high achiever, the mindset that they notoriously are running on is something called a fixed mindset. And that's a mindset that believes that once we actually get to a certain stage in the evolution of the maturation process, usually once we graduate from our schooling years and we get into our working years, that our knowledge is pretty fixed and finite, meaning that we're expecting ourselves to be cooked and to be able to then transition into our working lives, being able to just, get it right every single time perfectly. And we talked about this with Anne, right? In terms of that example that we use to sort of showcase how we get to the root of where these limiting beliefs live via these red flag emotions like displeasure, right? When we're receiving feedback from our leaders. And that right there we see is the entry point into finding the very root of the fixed mindset of a high achiever, which is the deficit beliefs, right? Believing that they inherently are not good enough, which is why they have to super compensate, they believe, in all of these perfect ways, where they're just showing up perfectly on the play at all times, always, no matter what, which we know is an impossibility. And it's inevitable that if somebody is receiving feedback and having that type of reaction, not response, it's probably because they're running on a fixed mindset. It's probably because when they receive anything that they perceive to be negative in regards to feedback on their performance, then that's what triggers that not good enough belief, right? And when it triggers the not good enough belief, we talked about that. That's not safety in the brain. That doesn't register as safety. It registers as unsafety. And so what did we say 4 episodes ago? The brain's responsibility is to keep us safe and alive. Takes that job very seriously. And so, yeah, if we are getting triggered into our deficit, beliefs in regards to how good or not good we are, and we get feedback that we're not that good or not as good as we thought we should be or we're supposed to be, that all of that is going to shut the brain down because the brain needs to go into its protective parts, right? Its protective mechanisms. And that's where we really, we get reactive in terms of turtle mode, right? We shut out the feedback, we shut off the ears, and we ultimately don't receive it. So that is the entry point in a lot of our programs, but it's the entry point to this conversation too, isn't it? Because if we're just going in to a feedback conversation unconsciously and we don't understand what type of mindset we're working on, we don't understand that, we need to be perfect or else we're completely going to be destabilized and shut down in our performance, then we're not going to have any consciousness to bring to that equation to help us battle through the resistance, to help us understand that it's our ego that's getting triggered, right, by that feedback. And that ultimately it's our defensive mechanisms, our parts that are reacting in these really maladaptive ways that end up sabotaging our performance. So I think that's the first place to prime, right, Trace? Wouldn't you agree? Is that we have to slide into the growth mindset. We have to decide to consciously enter into that feedback equation or conversation where we actually have a curiosity available to us, meaning that we are coming from the growth mindset, which believes that our capacity as human beings is not finite. It's abundant. It's ever evolving. There are always going to be more and more opportunities for our growth, more and more possibilities to ascend in our performance. And if that is the baseline of belief, next to, and I know that I am good enough, I know I have the capacity to grow and learn new things and improve and progress. And if I already have a baseline entry point belief system that I actually can work with feedback in this really proactive, responsive way that's going to open up all kinds of new choice, right? You see, my brain is going to go like that, right? It's going to go from needing to like turtle out and protect myself because this is an attack or assault on my identity, my very concept of self, to being one of, ooh, I'm curious. Why is this showing up for me today? And how can I work with that, with my curiosity for the purposes of my growth? And I think it's that entry point into these types of feedback exchanges that is completely game changer. Because obviously that creates the right associations for us to stay in a really empowered place, even when we're receiving feedback that's pointing out our blind spots, that's pointing out, where we're not doing as well as maybe we need to or could be doing. And then ultimately, yeah, I think that it just it keeps us grounded. When we're in curiosity, we're at the helm in our consciousness. Curiosity is where I'm calibrating everything in the room, right? Like I said, it opens up shop, cognitively speaking, in the brain. And that's where I'm actually going to be able to capture and fully engage in everything that's being delivered my way, again, for the purposes of my growth. So I think that's probably the coaching that we want to give anybody out there who's really working on their relationship to feedback, right? Is to be able to realize that it's going to take a ton of consciousness. You're going to have to be super duper aware in terms of what is my mindset in regards to growth and feedback? What is the current relationship that I have with that? And then how can I consciously make adjustments in my belief system so that I have the cognitive capacity, the state to be able to actually receive that feedback in a way that actually turns it into an opportunity for growth. We were talking about that last time, right? Like, we need feedback. Feedback is gold. If we are not consciously aware of areas where we can be improving, then it's as if those opportunities do not exist. Correct. And if I go in a fixed mindset, I get triggered, I shut down and I walk away, I'm leaving all those feedback chips on the table. I'm leaving those growth ops on the table. I'm not capitalizing on all of that. So I think that's the most important thing, is become super conscious of the mindset that you're running on as you start to engage in receiving feedback of any kind. I think the second thing is just staying really consciously at the helm as that feedback is coming your way. Because if you're just starting to adopt a growth mindset, if you're just starting to deconstruct a fixed one, then obviously it's not going to be a perfect science. You're going to get in there positively intended to receive with curiosity and a growth mindset. And then they're going to say that one thing that rubs against your insecurity, right? And then bam, you find yourself destabilized on the play. But even that is feedback on the play. Even that is illuminating a massive opportunity for further progress towards adopting this growth mindset. Because what we said last time is, as long as you consciously catch it on the play, and a reminder from a couple episodes ago, we said the quickest way to catch a read on that is your nervous system. Keeping your finger on that emotional pulse. Because then It just helps you to come right back to the helm consciously. Remember to get curious. Oh, interesting. I just got triggered by what he said.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to make note of that, right? Or maybe I'm going to pivot my perspective a little bit back to where I started and reminding and priming myself like why I'm here and that this is intended in a positive way for my growth. Then you
Mm-hmm.
can actually start to integrate all of this in the actual context of that feedback conversation. And that's where the
Mm-hmm.
growth lives. That
Mm-hmm.
is in learning to trust yourself to be able to navigate, right? Having these difficult types of feedback exchanges in a way that is actually helping you to reprogram your mindset, is actually helping you develop more and more sense of security and ultimately the right associations with feedback, right? So that each time you go in there, you get better and better at receiving it, right? That's what this is called, repping it out, we say in our locker rooms, is like where we actually get to integrate those real-time pivots in our decision-making process, where we get to catch ourselves consciously and go right instead of left at the fork in the road. And that ultimately is like the deepest form of leadership development, I feel like, that could ever possibly take place in an area like this. Because an area like this, we can see it's mostly emotional intelligence, right? It's most of what runs interference on our growth are the very human emotions that are totally natural to experience because we're not set up like this in our jobs. We're not set up like this in our schooling years, even. Our teachers didn't teach us how to receive feedback well. I didn't get that from my parents either, or most of my hockey coaches, right? Until I got to Princeton. This is the first time I learned about this damn stuff. So, yeah, I think that that's probably a nice little runway in terms of giving our people a bit more step of depth in terms of a track that they can now start to elicit and work with as they leave the locker room today.
Yeah, I love it.
What do you think?
Such a like, yeah, no, it's a great, you gave us such a great explanation of how it all works. I think the triggers piece is really the one that is a starting point, and being able to identify where messages don't come through
Mm-hmm.
in a way that you can actually feel good about or understand or agree with. The ones that kind of set you off are the ones that where you need to really kind of like take a pulse and say, okay, what's that all about?
Mm-hmm.
And I bet you if you go back and think about why that is so, not aligned with what you think or how you feel about it, there's probably some experiences there and beliefs that are
For
holding
sure.
you back.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's the number one piece that, people need to start thinking about. But I think that, as you said, as you rep it out, I've noticed over my experience working with you is that by being more open to feedback and going back in and getting more, it becomes easier.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And that is like amazing because then you know that if you do the work, there is huge benefits at the end.
Mm-hmm.
On top of being comfortable to receive feedback, you're also getting amazing feedback on your blind spots, but then you can work on to close the gap
Mm-hmm.
and you're improving as an individual, as an employee, or as a human being, as a mom, as a dad, as a leader.
Mm-hmm.
So there's no losing in that theory,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
which is like what gives me motivation and inspiration and courage to keep going.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's what there's always like a piece that we're looking for. Why would I do all this? Right. At the end of the day, it is hard to get feedback,
Mm-hmm.
and some of it we won't like. But to know that it's showing up for your own goodness, when we talk about conscious leadership, it's showing up for you, not
Mm-hmm.
against you, but for you to support you in your growth.
Mm-hmm.
And if you can sit back and kind of like take a look and reflect and try to see where you can integrate some of that feedback, where it resonates, and start doing a little bit of that work, one is you become more open to feedback, which is
Mm-hmm.
amazing because we get that all day long, even at the grocery store. Somebody looks at you sideways because you did
Yeah.
something, like it's just always there.
Yeah.
Um, you can, flow easier through your life. But then on top of that, you can have all these like increment steps of all this feedback coming in, and you tuning yourself every little bit, doing the work so that you become that aspirational self you want to be.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And I think that's the inspiration in doing all that work.
Mm-hmm.
But it's very hard to see when you're in that zone of like
Oh,
just getting
totally.
that one piece of feedback. But I think just, to give a little bit of like tips and tricks to the people is that if you can actually just see it as a process and as a end goal of being a better human,
Mm-hmm.
and that have, continue to evolve and grow through that conscious lens that we talk about, it just becomes so much more fun to do. Right.
Mm-hmm.
And we see the benefits, and we see how it could change the way that you show up for other people,
Mm-hmm.
and how you can actually perform better.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think it's a massive game-changing moment when you go from being a high achiever, trying to control these perfect results and outcomes, to becoming a high performer who just owns the process and
Mm-hmm.
enjoys the process so much, right? Because it's why we're here, we said, is for growth. That is literally the core value of a high performer, right? And they're not competing with everybody else. They're competing with their own potential.
Mm-hmm.
And we
Mm-hmm.
also talked about how they pull that power back home to the helm, right? They don't put the locus of control outside of them. They don't externalize that on outcomes and things that they can't control, like results. They pull it inside and they focus on owning the process because that is in their control. And the mindset that they bring to that process is what takes them from striving, actually surviving, which is not a lot of enjoyment or fulfillment, folks, in the nervous system, right? To thriving, which is where we said our health is good, our relationships are good. We said we take this work energy home to our families. I mean, even our mindset in regards to feedback is setting a template for our children as they go to
Mm-hmm.
school, to sports, out into the world, right?
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I think it's a marked difference. I used to always use the example of when I was learning this stuff in university. I used to be the high achiever, I'd go on a breakaway. I'd notice I was on a breakaway. I'd get nervous, so I'd like get a little tight and I'd shank the puck. And then I'd skate back to my bench. Damn it, Susan, what? Slamming my stick, so unhappy with myself, right? That not good enough belief being triggered. To me, learning about the growth mindset and understanding, when I shanked the puck, immediately I needed to get consciously curious as to why. Like, what the heck was different? I'm always sniping that top shelf on a breakaway. What was different about this? And I would actually skate back to the bench and really start to prime based on me actually being available to that evidence in real time on that very play in a way that helped me integrate where the opportunities for growth were. Oh, I was on a breakaway and I realized I was on a breakaway and I got nervous. So my body language tensed up. Okay, great. So next time I find myself alone in the slot, I'm going to take a deep breath. And then I'm going to be able to pick my target, bam, with accuracy. And
Mm-hmm.
then I start to see this whole continuous improvement cycle start to kick in my performance, where I would do that as a discipline, as a habit, as a way of orienting in my performance. And that accelerates our rate of growth oh so much, right? Because that's predictable growth. Once it reaches
Mm-hmm.
habit status, and this is just the way I orient towards feedback, give me the gold, give me the gold. I'm hungry for it. Asking my coaches, did you see what happened on that play? You know, that's when it really starts to accelerate even more, right, Trace? Is because then it's like you trust that formula and owning that process so much because it's predictably getting you into that growth zone where each and every time you do that, you know, curiosity, growth mindset, looking for the opportunities for growth, getting intentional about how to integrate that. That every single time you see that you're building so much confidence in terms of your potential. Because just because I haven't been able to do that thing I want to do yet, I know I'm coming for it because I know there's predictability to my growth and improvement. When somebody brings me feedback about something I need to change, I'm like, no problem, I got it. Because I'm confident in my capacity to grow. But if we're still in a fixed mindset, if we're still unconsciously leading ourselves in the world via these parts, right, that are run by our ego, that take everything personally, because that's what that is. We said the maladaptation of a high achiever trying to control external outcomes is for safety. It's a supplement to their self-worth. That's life or death. That's why we say striving is actually surviving, because it's catastrophic to the nervous system when we can't control those outcomes perfectly. But if we get stuck there for too long, does that annihilate one's rate of growth, right? And I think that's where we start to see high achievers burn out. That's where we start to see their brains disengage. And that's when they start to get into the crisis, into the tailspins, you know?
Yeah.
But always an easier thing to intervene on this upstream. The upstream intervention, we always say that ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. So that's why we wanted to bring this to our folks today, right, Trace? Is that we wanted to really rip this thing apart even deeper, because this one core lesson, and I call it a core lesson because this is being a high performer. You cannot be a high performer if you don't have this really high quality relationship with feedback. If you don't see it as your teammate, if you don't see it as something you want to engage in on the daily, then you're not ever going to be able to realize that potential, right? Because this is literally the method to the madness in terms of how we play our biggest impact game. This is how we realize max potential, is we have to be in some sort of systematic approach to continuous improvement. Trace, any final thoughts or questions in regard to anything I just threw on the mat today?
No, I think maybe it's another show is just to kind of go in to kind of dig in a little further, I guess, in terms of why feedback is so uncomfortable for some people, right? And maybe we could take an example and run that through you can take some of my examples of when I've gotten feedback and what I've discovered through that whole process that you take me on, which is around, there was some little incident or that happened to me that then triggered me for the rest of my life in terms of an experience that I've had. I don't think we realize that it's not just who we are. We're not just made like that. It's not just DNA. It's actually an experiences or one experience or many experiences that you've had that has created that belief system. It could have been your parents, your things that you were told, your teachers, all these surrounding things that bring you that kind of like belief that then inhibits you for growth unless you go back and revisit and do the work on, is that the truth? And is this helping me in my growth today as an adult? It helped me and served me very well as a child, but now I'm an adult and I want to go over here, but now I can't go there without unpacking and understanding how I reframe this belief that's now got me stuck. Right. And so I think that's a fun one we could do, and we could use some of my examples on another pod and go walk people through that, because I think you do need that mirror, that coach sitting there to kind of bring those up to it's not easy to see where these connections are made.
No.
Which is why it is so important to have that coach sitting in front of you and helping you see where those experiences may have come in to cause this kind of belief that we have, and then help you reframe it so that you can set yourself up for that growth mindset we're talking about.
I want everybody to presume, if they've never done this type of mindset work before, it's more than likely that you're starting from a fixed mindset. Given our history in terms of where we're coming from and how we were socialized and conditioned notoriously, growing up in the 80s and going to school through the 90s, and you know what I mean? Like this was not the playbook, okay? Our parents didn't have this playbook. Our teachers didn't have this playbook. My coaches definitely did not have this playbook for the most part until the 2000s, you know? So this is something that I also want to say in the leadership development space. I work with a ton of leaders. This is always one of the baseline lessons I have to go through right off the draw, you know, because it's on average that we don't even get leadership development opportunities until like 5 years in a leadership role, or the average age of like 42 or 43 years old. So I just think this is probably where we all want to start, right? Is just the presupposition that there are more opportunities for our growth than we think there might be, right? If we're first entering into a mindset arena. This is still the anomaly in 2025 in terms of leadership development and training. Most of that training won't even take you to this step of depth in terms of your operating system. You know? So,
Mm-hmm.
so yeah, go out these locker room doors, play with these exercises. All
Yeah.
the knowledge in the world will not equal changing a single damn thing. You know, motivation gets you going, but it's consistency that keeps you growing. And that means that your skates actually have to hit the ice when you leave this locker room door. It means you actually have to go out into real time and start to rep these concepts out. And I really want that to be the final call on our podcast today,
Mm-hmm.
because something happens viscerally when you experience what opens up on the other side of these practices, right,
Mm-hmm.
Trace? It's
Mm-hmm.
like that's when you finally start to get the, you know, you get the taste, or you get the feel for what is truly possible in terms of opening up your potential and really starting to explore and play with that.
Mm-hmm.
And that is so much fun. It's so invigorating for our development, right? But it's nothing that you will ever be able to access unless you go and make these new choices in real time, contextual examples. So
I
that's
love
my
it.
final call today. What's your final
Yeah.
call for our peeps?
Yeah, I think it's going out there and trying it out for size and see how you take that pulse when feedback's coming in, and you don't have to solve it all in a few hours, right? Just
Mm-mm.
listen to your body, listen to what you're feeling, and then take a few moments to get curious about why that is.
Mm-hmm.
One step at a time. But
Mm-hmm.
unless you try it, it's really difficult to explain it. But
Mm-hmm.
it isn't about reading 100 books a year that's going to get you where you need to. You actually have to do the work. And this
Mm-hmm.
is the work we're talking about.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, this is where the behavior modification
Yeah.
lives.
Yeah.
Is it has to reach that level. It has to reach the level of behavior, which requires going through the portal of consciousness where
Mm-hmm.
where the new choices live.
That's right.
You can't get to the new choices unless you go through that locker room door.
Yeah.
All right, this was amazing. I'm having so much fun going deep into the well to explore these concepts that we know are at the jugular of everything that we stand for on this Leadership 2.0 mission. This definitely makes the case yet again for why we're so fired up about conscious leadership, because it really is a ticket to the growth zone in so many different ways that we're just scratching the surface with here in the summer. But
Mm-hmm.
it's really starting to get me even more excited about, yeah, just this new innovative entry point into understanding why consciousness in the context of leadership is what is going to change the way this game is being played forever.
Mm-hmm.
So that's it. That's all for this week. Thank you for sending us that feedback. We're loving hearing from you in this year of co-creation. We are so fired up about the ideas that it's helping us to co-create with you. Please send us any feedback that you have based on these conversations around feedback. Give us a sight line on anything else you'd like us to dig into in the well. You can email me, susan@elitehighperformance.com, with any of that feedback. And if yeah, you're interested in learning about any of this style of coaching, leadership coaching, high performance coaching, mindset coaching. You can find all that information out over at the website elitehighperformance.com. You can even get a 30-minute free consult with me where I can shine the light on your level of consciousness and really start to open up your gap. So you can find all of that over the website elitehighperformance.com. Don't forget to hit like and subscribe on your way out the locker room doors today. Share this episode with a friend or a colleague, perhaps, that you have to exchange feedback with on the regular, maybe even your own leader, perhaps. That's it for this week. We'll see you all right back here in the locker room next Tuesday.